To cap off the celebrations at IAE 2953, RSI has announced the concept ship the Arrastra. With the popularity of mining, as well as how detailed it is as a game loop already, it is no surprise to find a few prospector miners on any given server each day. Of course, with larger groups of people, these mining operations usually end up with scout ships and Argo moles to increase the profits of that operation. The Arrastra is here to break up that party, with a secret strength that's sure to multiply its abilities. Hello folks, Space Tech here, and welcome to a first look and buyer's guide for the RSI Arrastra. I'll be going over everything we know about the ship, as well as how it compares to the mole. It's worth keeping in mind that this ship is still in concept, so everything here is subject to change as the Arrastra moves through the ship pipeline. So with the largest miner being the colossal Orion, and the Arrastra needing only one more crew than the mole, does the Arrastra have a place between the mole and the Orion, or does it replace the mole altogether? If I helped you make your decision by the end of the video, a like and subscribe is always appreciated. Starting off with the tour. At the front, we have the main utility of the Arrastra, its mining lasers. In total, this ship comes with 3 remote mining turrets, 2 at the front and 1 in the middle on top of the ship. A unique feature of these turrets is the fact that they are all mounted on rails. This means that the front lasers will be able to move back and forth along the side of the ship, similar to turrets on an RSI Scorpius. The top-mounted mining laser will also be able to move from the top to the bottom of the ship, giving it a huge 360 firing arc both on top and below the ship. Just behind the mining lasers, we have 2 more remote turrets, each outfitted with 4 size 3 weapons. These don't seem to be on rails, but still look to have a decent firing arc. There is also 1 more remote turret mounted at the rear of the ship. Here, it's still unclear, but it does look like there is some kind of rail system which would allow the turret to move to the bottom of the ship, similar to the one on the Scorpius. It's still unclear if this is actually the case, or if the rails are just for aesthetic purposes. Finally, you get access to 8 size 1 missiles and 4 size 3 missiles. Behind the weapons, we have a massive external cargo hold, capable of holding 512 SCU of refined ore. This seems to be stored in conventional SCU boxes instead of the saddlebags of ships like the Mole and the Prospector. There is also an internal storage of 64 SCU, right beside the vehicle bay. Speaking of which, the vehicle bay is advertised to be able to take 2 Greycat Rock DS. Of course, you won't ever actually use the Rock DS, but there should be plenty of space to carry other vehicles. At the back, you also have access to a tractor beam. We don't know what exactly the capabilities of this tractor beam will be, but it's safe to assume that it'll be able to move at least small rocks toward and away from the ship. Finally, the crown jewel of the Arrastra. It has an onboard refinery, joining the Orion as the only ships that can refine their own ore instead of relying on a Galaxy or the Misk Expanse. So how does the Arrastra stack up against its competitors? Right off the bat, it's worth mentioning that the Arrastra will be much closer to the Mole in function and role than it will be to the Orion. The Orion is a ship so large that it makes an Idris look small, and so will never be able to visit planets, instead focusing on mining vast swaths of asteroids in space. The Orion is also an extremely old concept, so we'll definitely see changes before going live. I also won't be comparing the Prospector at all, since that's a solo miner that will be engaging in a completely different style of gameplay. It's also worth mentioning that CIG recently said that newer concepts will appear to be stronger due to recent design decisions to upsize components. This means that it is possible that the Mole will end up with components larger than the ones it has today, but that being said, the current comparison between the Mole and the Arrastra doesn't seem unreasonable, considering that the Arrastra is an entire size up from the Mole and seems to have the appropriate components that reflect that size. So starting off with the components, the Arrastra has size 3 mining lasers compared to size 2 on the Mole. This means that you'll be able to pump a lot more power into rocks, allowing you to break much larger rocks in space or on the ground. Think of this difference in similar terms to the Mole versus the Prospector, just not as drastic. 3 mining lasers all focused on the same target should be able to break all but the very largest rocks. Those would be reserved for the Orion, of course. These turrets can also be accessed straight from the bridge of the ship, allowing for the operators to stay safe in the heart of the ship instead of exposed in the same way as Mole turret operators are. Next, the Arrastra has a large radar. This is the same as on the Orion and one size up compared to the one on the Mole. While the details of scanning and radars are still in the air, it's not unreasonable to think that the larger scanner will give these ships the ability to find and scan mineable rocks from a greater distance. The larger radar may also increase the ship's ability to detect threats at a greater distance, allowing you to escape before the pirates can even reach you. Speaking of escape, the Arrastra comes with a large or size 3 quantum drive. This is one size up from the Mole. These larger drives tend to be less efficient than their smaller counterparts, but quantum travel and drives still have a lot of balance and tweaking to go through as larger systems are introduced to the game. We do at least know that the Arrastra will have large quantum fuel tanks, while there is a medium one on the Mole. This, to me, points towards the Arrastra being designed to go further out into space, away from stations. With the introduction of Pyro, this is more important than ever. I believe that dangerous systems like Pyro will be where we find the most lucrative ore to facilitate high-risk, high-reward gameplay. While in Pyro, we know that fuel will be less accessible, so being able to travel further out should enable the Arrastra to operate in Pyro with greater efficiency, perhaps going places that the Mole can't even reach without the help of refueling ships. Moving on, the Arrastra has the same size power plant and cooler when compared to the Mole, but it has 2 of each compared to the one on the Mole. While there are definitely more components to cool and power on the Arrastra, the extra power plant and cooler do give it a form of contingency against damage. Let's say you were in combat and you were to lose a cooler or a power plant on the Arrastra. You could always turn off all non-essential systems, allowing you to escape just powering and cooling your thrusters and quantum drive. This won't be possible on the Mole, since once you lose either of those components, your ship is now dead in space, unable to function at all until the component is replaced or repaired. This survivability is also aided by the massive difference in shields between the two ships. The Mole comes with 2 size 2 shields compared to 2 size 3 shields on the Arrastra. While on paper, this difference doesn't seem crazy, the way shields are balanced today, size 3 shields have more than 10 times the shield HP of a size 2 shield. This means that with the HP difference between the two shields, the Arrastra would have up to 200,000 more shield HP than the Mole. While this is balanced somewhat by the Arrastra's size difference, I do expect shields to get some sort of adjustment to bring these sizes into greater parity with each other eventually. Of course, that's not the only way a ship can defend itself. The Arrastra comes with 3 remote turrets, each of which can outfit 4 size 3 weapons. These weapons will likely be accessible from the same place as the mining lasers, which means that at the drop of a hat, your crew can switch between mining and defending your ship from a lot of angles. Seeing as the Arrastra isn't a combat ship, it doesn't look like any of the turrets will be able to fire at targets directly in front of the ship, instead focused on protecting the rear and sides of the ship. Comparing this to the Mole is just embarrassing for our poor Argo ship. The Mole comes outfitted with 2 size 2 weapons, which are both controlled by the pilot and only face forward. This is the direction you definitely won't be facing as you run away from any would-be attackers of your ship. Even if you did decide to engage in combat, the pilot now has to manage both flying the ship as well as hitting the target with its tiny weapons. All of this is while the crew just holds on for dear life, trying to run engineering if possible. Overall, there is no question that the Arrastra is designed to be able to defend itself, but not serve as an attack vehicle. On to cargo. The Mole can carry up to 96 SCU of ore in its saddlebags. This is where the Arrastra really shows how self-sufficient it's designed to be. It carries a massive 512 SCU on the outside and 64 SCU internally. In addition to this colossal size, it appears that the cargo is contained within SCU boxes instead of saddlebags. This means that you should be able to fit the boxes into any standard cargo grid with maximum efficiency. Just the external amount of cargo means that you'll be able to fill up almost an entire caterpillar with your ore, allowing you to continue mining out in the verse while the caterpillar moves your ore to be sold. I believe that the internal cargo storage of the Arrastra will serve as storage for the day-to-day supplies of running the ship as well as the vehicles inside. This brings us to another strength of the RSI Arrastra. The vehicle bay on the ground floor looks to be able to house at least 2 Rock DS ground mining vehicles. While those particular ones are not in the best of state, The amount of space looks to easily house other vehicles like the base ROC, Cyclones, STVs, and more. What I do find interesting though is that it looks like there is almost enough space to safely store the larger ground vehicles like the Ballista. While I hesitate to say for sure that they would allow the Atlas platform to fit, the ability to carry some extra defensive capabilities that you can deploy as you mine rocks on the ground is pretty incredible. This takes us to the secret strength. From what we can see, you should easily be able to fit a pair of Furies in the ship, perhaps even ships like the Razor. While you could use these snub fighters for defense, I think their greatest use is going to be to help the Arrastra to scout for great rocks to mine. We already know that in today's game, mining operations greatly benefit from small, fast ships going ahead to scout for valuable rocks. The larger miners can only cover so much ground, and the scout can find these new rocks as the Arrastra mines the previous ones. All of this increases your mining efficiency and uptime, and so your profits will follow as well. Then we have the final multiplier of profits on the Arrastra, its onboard refinery. We know that refined ore sells for a lot more than raw ore does. The biggest drawback to refining your ore are the time and the cost of refining the material itself. The Arrastra helps tackle both of these issues. The onboard refinery will allow you to always be refining ore, even as you search for new deposits. While station refineries are huge, they're often slow because of the sheer number of orders at any given time. This allows you to circumvent that entirely, as well as avoiding paying the fees that would have to be paid out either to a station or to other players that would refine your ore in ships like the Galaxy or the Expanse. The advantage of an onboard refinery cannot be overstated in my opinion. So should you buy the RSI Arrastra? Usually, larger ships come with the drawback of needing much more crew to operate. The Mole needs 3 people at least to operate at maximum mining efficiency. The Arrastra would also only need 3 people to operate every laser on the ship. Even if it did need 1 more person, there is no hiding the fact that the Arrastra seems to be extremely strong compared to the Mole. Of course, it is a larger ship and is so a bigger target for pirates, both in terms of how lucrative it is, as well as a larger signature, allowing it to be found with greater ease. In my mind, this is more than accounted for by the much better weapons and components, as well as the ability to hold its own scouts. While the Mole may end up seeing an increase to certain component sizes, I don't think it can really compare. That being said, the decision to purchase an Arrastra has one major downside: price. On launch, the Arrastra is selling for $525 war bond and $575 with store credit. This is almost twice the price of a Mole. That difference cannot be overstated. I'd expect the Arrastra will also be increasing in price as it goes flight ready over the next couple years as CIG works through the RSI ships. You can of course protect yourself from the price increase by grabbing a CCU to the Arrastra, but there is still no denying that it's an expensive ship. It lands $75 less than the Orion itself. So if you're in the market for a large-scale multi-crew mining, but don't think you'll be able to operate an Orion, I think the Arrastra is an obvious purchase. Always keep in mind though, that these ships will be earnable in-game, so don't feel compelled to drop the cash today. So tell me, what do you think about the RSI Arrastra? Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Take care and see you in the next one. Man, why do RSI ships keep looking so cool?